What's going on, guys? This is the Red Rogue, and today's going to be a bit of a news update of some occurring and upcoming changes to a piece of the Shadowlands pie that might not be that sweet for everyone. Torghast, Tower of the Damned. As some of you have probably noticed recently, I've been doing a decent amount of Torghast boss guides, and apparently Torghast has been on Blizzard's radar as well, as we'll be seeing a lot of tuning changes happening this week. So let's dig into all of that with today's video and what I think of them. So, Torghast. Honestly, it's one of my favorite features introduced with Shadowlands, but for a lot of folks, regardless of class or spec, it has become quite a headache. Since it is where most of your soul ash farming comes from, it is also where most of your legendary power acquisition comes from too. On top of that, the Twisting Corridors version of Torghast is where the achievement mount comes from, which is one of the only mounts that you can use in the Maw, which makes it kind of a big deal to earn. So due to this, Torghast is a pretty vital component of your power and progression in Shadowlands. Originally on beta, Torghast was a pretty slapstick form of gameplay where you ran in, had tons of amazing powers, and slapped your enemies to death with your power level that was well above 9,000. However, it seems Blizzard, going into the launch of Shadowlands, was planning a much harder experience. Well, it seems they've turned their opinion on that pretty quickly due to the overall state of the Tower of the Damned and how the player base thinks of it. Originally, some buffs actually went into Torghast earlier this week, but were quickly reverted into a sweeping series of nerfs. This video will cover all of those things, so let's go over what is in the works for our Tower of the Damned and what I personally think of all of it. So let's get into the nitty-gritty of things. Some of these changes are already in-game, and some, a la Blizzard, are coming soon TM. Across the board, there will be a flat decrease in health and damage of all creatures, starting at 6% at Layer 1 and going up to 26% at Layer 8. The health nerf is probably the more noteworthy change to me, as some of these things just take far too long to kill, and Torghast runs can take well over an hour on higher layers. However, I'm sure the damage nerf is a welcome change to classes that don't have a billion CCs and amazing defensives like us rogues have. Even for rogues, it's nice to see as it makes it a slightly less perilous trip through the Tower of the Damned. Health of enemies will also scale more based on group size, up to a maximum of a 25% decrease in a 5-man. For damage of creatures, 4 and 5-man groups will see up to a 20% damage difference. I've only ever personally run Torghast as either a solo player or in a duo group, so I can't say how aggressive the scaling was, but with these numbers for tuning, I can imagine they expected a pretty good amount of coordination out of groups with this large of a tuning pass. I've actually wanted to do Torghast with my usual 5-man Mythic Plus team, as I think it'd be pretty enjoyable like that, so maybe I'll give it a try sometime. A nice change in my opinion is that if your end of floor guardian enemy is a spellcaster, they won't spam their main move quite as much as they did before. Now, being a super humble and charming rogue type character, this was never too much of an issue for myself, but having talked with others and seeing the amount of spammy moves some enemies can have and how hard they can hit, this was a massive issue for many classes in the game, so for sure a welcome change across the board. Speaking of the end of a floor in Torghast, you will now have all of your major cooldowns reset when you finish a floor. This makes a lot of sense to me, and just cuts out some of the downtime that I'm sure a lot of players have, myself included. Generally speaking, for higher layers of Torghast, I can take easily over an hour to clear them, so shaving off even a few minutes here and there is a good change in my opinion. I don't mind taking my time, but waiting for cooldowns when I just cleared a floor seems really redundant. A lot of changes are coming to the Anima powers and Anima cells we acquire during Torghast as well. The first starting Anima cell when we walk into a wing of Torghast is now much more likely to be a stronger option, meaning you hopefully won't have to just kill yourself like 5 times to try and reset the wing, because just walking in and out doesn't do that, which is something I've tried a couple times just to experiment with ways to make a Torghast run a little easier if I have bad luck. Rare creatures will also always drop Anima cells with 3 options, as many times there are 2 options, but they can be somewhat hindering or just not very good. Honestly, I kinda wish there was a way that if I didn't want an Anima power at all from the choices, I didn't have to take one, because sometimes it makes you pick something really stupid, like not being able to walk backwards or not being able to jump if the other option is something equally hindering. Regular enemies will also be much more likely to drop Anima cells, so you'll be more inclined to clear floors of all enemies for more powers instead of just grinding through them with less enthusiasm and more obligation. I think this is a fantastic change, as there have been many times where I can clear an entire floor of every enemy, and maybe only one of them will have an Anima cell, if any at all. And probably one of the biggest, most noteworthy changes of all, Unnatural power will now no longer make rares, elites, or bosses immune to CC once they hit 10 stacks. This is a huge change and will make a lot of the more dangerous foes in Torghast, including the bosses I've been doing quick fight guides for if you haven't seen any, much more manageable. Definitely a great change, especially for classes that simply don't have that many crowd control options available to them and are running out of time to kill the bosses before they just chain spam moves at them. There were also some targeted nerfs and tuning towards particularly annoying ads in Torghast. Probably two of the more annoying ones in my opinion were the tower sentinels and those damned skeletons that blow up if you don't kill them from far away. Tower sentinels give an aura debuff that affects an entire floor of Torghast, resulting in a haste and movement speed debuff called Oppressive Aura. This made your movement speed and haste reduced by 5%, scaling up to 25% if you were even slightly near one. This has been dropped down to scaling to only 10%, a huge reduction while still giving some importance to killing them. Those skeleton you see bunches of now will explode after 2 seconds and mark the area in which the explosion will take place, instead of having like 18,000 of them blow up at once in melee range with their stupid physical damage taken debuff resulting in the explosions becoming even more lethal with each one. The Massive Crusher's armor plating cast is now 3 seconds long instead of 1 second, and it's cast every 16 seconds instead of every 8 seconds. For classes with longer or no interrupts, this is a welcome change. For other enemies, a lot of the Dead Souls in Mortregar have been tuned as well. Dead Soul Chorus and their Death Blast now only reduce healing received by 15%, stacking 5 times versus 25% at 4 times before. Dead Soul Stalkers now vanish after 15 melee attacks instead of 7 and remain hidden for 15 seconds instead of 30, which is amazing because these things are just stupidly annoying for no reason. The Dead Soul Devils, those immortal enemies that come back after you defeat them, now reincarnate with only 15% health instead of 40%, so they're quite a bit less of a nuisance. Some bosses have also seen some tuning too, and honestly, I imagine a few more will be in the future as well. Elder Longbranch and Decay Speaker will now only get 6 stacks of their Hardened Shell ability, which reduces attack damage taken by 10% per stack and is taken off 1 stack at a time by using abilities on them. Elder Longbranch's healing buff, Bounty of the Forest, now takes 4 seconds to cast instead of 2, allowing for more interrupt and CC time, and he only casts it once every 45 seconds instead of once every 30. Definitely a welcome change for folks who can't dispel the buff if he gets the cast off, or people have more time to interrupt it as well now. Goxel the Devourer's health and damage is decreased by 10%, and time between casts of Mass Devour is increased to 36 seconds, up from 18 seconds. I actually had Goxel as my boss for this Layer 8 clear that you're seeing footage of right now, and this was taken later in the afternoon after all these tuning changes supposedly were going through, but his damage was still pretty darn high. However, his health was noticeably lower even than the Layer 7 clear I had done the day prior, so maybe this change has gone in and he still hits like a truck, I don't know. And lastly, a couple nerfs targeted at the upper reaches wing of Torghast and some of the Torment effects. Fracturing Forces and Eye of Skuldus enemies' health and damage are reduced by half, and now only increase Assassin's health by 5% per stack instead of 10%. Fracturing Forces and Eye of Skuldus enemies will no longer ambush players who have recently been in combat either, and enemies with the Jailer's Directive buff now only get a 10% health buff instead of 50%, helping to reduce the grindiness and amount of time that you spend killing high health enemies, which is definitely a welcome sight to see. So far, that's all that's on the table for Torghast tuning, and in a timely way, let's talk about things, because alliteration. Honestly, all of this is probably for the best. I personally like the challenge of Torghast in its current state, but after having done it on the beta for months and months where it was kinda sorta just like running a Diablo 3 rift, power overwhelming and all that sort of affair, it did seem kind of odd that it became a lot harder only a couple weeks before launch. From my understanding, the original design intention of Torghast was a place where we could run around, slapping mobs upside the head with crazy power and damage and stuff, and just having a very different game experience than what we're used to. In the state of Torghast prior to these tuning changes, it kinda just feels like a high-level Mythic Plus key, requiring a lot of strategy and mastery of your class, as well as quite a bit of luck to get good anima powers and whatnot. And I'm not opposed to that at all. I don't mind a layer of Torghast taking an hour, but it does kind of feel bad for folks who spend that much time and yet don't get those few Anima powers they might need to finish off a boss, resulting in a lot of time wasted and no soul ash to make or upgrade your legendaries with, or heck to even earn your legendary power at all. I do think there should be a challenge mode sort of component to Torghast, and that will be in the Twisting Corridors, which is a component that isn't currently unlocked yet as of this video. But the more weekly progression part for Soul Ash should probably be a little bit more approachable to players of all skill levels, as it is what directly holds you back for legendary crafting. Some might disagree with that, since it involves getting your legendaries and whatever, but realistically, legendaries in Shadowlands are more of a namesake sort of deal, as it's not quite the same like getting the Fangs of the Father, or Sulfuris, or Thunder Fury, or anything like that anymore, and it's just tied behind small progression of player power and time spent, not the several month-long grinds and RNG drops of the past. Again, maybe not a popular opinion, but if legendaries are going to exist in the literal dozens at a time and they're only a few percent of DPS gains anyways, they aren't exactly all that legendary anymore in the first place and should be reasonably acquirable by players of all skill levels. Of course, higher performing players will gain more use out of them, but everyone should have the chance to get a nice shiny piece of orange gear for the first time, even if more veteran players feel it's not quite the same as they were in the past. Anyways folks, I hope this video has helped to keep you up to date and informed about Torghast, as well as to give you a little slice of my opinion on the matter. Let me know what you think in the comments below, and if you found this video useful or entertaining, then maybe consider leaving a like or even sharing it with other folks you know who might appreciate this little realm of Shiba Shenanigans that I call home. Heck, if you're feeling really saucy, maybe even become a subscriber. I do new uploads every weekday on a variety of WoW-related things, so hopefully I'll continue to have things that might prove useful to you. And I'd like to thank all of my regular viewers, commenters, subscribers, and especially my patrons, who all help make these Shiba Shenanigans possible. Thank you all so much for watching. This is the Red Rogue, and I'll see you guys around.